Now, believe it or not, this isn't actually a GEC valve radio. It's actually a GEC fan eater. I think when my wife bought it, she did suspect it might not be a radio, but she wasn't exactly sure what it was. And she saw the fact it was in a Bakelite case and it had some wires sticking out of it, and she knew that it'd interest me. And I've got to admit, she's right, it does interest me. I think it's fascinating. Now, I'm thinking it would probably be sensible not to do too much with this radio, because just looking at the back of it, there's some white crumbly material, and I'm pretty sure, well, I'm absolutely certain in fact, that's asbestos, and it is crumbly and it is horrid, and I suspect all that asbestos dust might be going on inside this. So I think the reality is what we need to do is actually call it a day. I'm going to take this outside and try and remove that piece of asbestos sheeting and dispose of it, because it's not going to be safe, is it? I was just looking at the way the wires terminate here on the heating element, and I was just wondering if this was some form of bimetallic strip, but it doesn't have any movement in it. It seems solid, so that's a bit strange the way they've done that. But these are, these are thick wires, and I'm a bit worried that this lot is covered in asbestos. And you can see the heating element behind here, and the heating element is on a metal frame, but it's got some lovely little I don't know, what would you call it, ceramic beads, which are used as insulators just to stop it from shorting out. Let's see if I can get you in. Oh, maybe you can see them. Now, hopefully you can see these ceramic beads here, which are being used to insulate the heating element. They're really quite cute. It's also interesting just to note that this apparatus wasn't actually earthed. So yeah, again, it's another nice feature to the fact that it has this rather dubious electrical safety. Nice motor here, feels a little bit stiff, but it looks as though it could probably be re-lubricated, pulled apart, put back together again. I think what we need to do is we'll just disconnect these electrical wires from it, and then I'm going to take it outside and I'm going to take this metal framework off and try and dispose of this sheet of asbestos behind it, because I'm sure that, it's very crumbly and we don't want asbestos in the house. I don't want to be breathing it in. So I think that's what we need to do. So it looks like that was the switch to the heating element. All the wiring, all the rubber insulation has actually just crumbled away off here. And it's actually exposing the cabling underneath, which, it's not copper coloured. I guess it must be tin plated, but it's lovely bright silver. It's in actual internal condition of the wire, looks like new. It's just the insulation that's perished. So these two wires here are going to the heating element, so we'll just cut them off. Now, one thing I think is really a nice touch is that the heating elements run through these little porcelain insulators, electrical insulators, stroke spacers, and that's to stop these heating elements, which will be, live effectively at mains voltage. It just stops them from actually touching the metal framework. Now, interestingly enough, this equipment didn't appear to have been earthed. So again, back in 1938, electrical safety was potentially all a little bit dubious, but again, probably did a lot to remove stupid people from the gene pool, so it's not all bad. So does anyone remember those chest expanders? Is that what they call them? Chest expanders, exercise bits of gym equipment where, you used to have these big springs and you'd have two handles on it and you'd try and pull them apart across your chest, and then they would snap together, ripping out all your chest hair or trapping things. Yeah, quite horrible, probably pretty useless, but yeah, very reminiscent of that. Now, this GEC heater was manufactured in 1938, and the chassis itself is just manufactured from pieces of pressed flat steel that are bent, and these pieces of different pieces of flat steel, they're actually spot welded together. Again, I just thought that was interesting to see that, things were being spot welded in 1938. I quite often think of spot welding as being, relatively modern for making car bodies. You see these big robots in car factories welding the panels together, but, the spot welding technology is obviously quite old technology. So a lot of the construction is spot welded, but our thermal cutout device here, I just noticed that that's actually riveted on. So I don't quite know why they would have chosen to put spot welds on some things and rivets on another. Maybe they saw this part of being more critical and needed a more positive form of construction, because spot welds can break, whereas these rivets are maybe a stronger, more reliable way of doing it. I'm just guessing, I have no idea. It could also be that this assembly was added at some later part of the production cycle, and maybe they couldn't actually get the spot welding equipment in, but they could maybe get the riveting equipment in. So also as part of this heater assembly, we've obviously got a fan to effectively to blow the hot air away from the heating element, to keep the heating element really cool, but actually to blow the hot air out of the heater and actually into the room. Now, just looking at this electric motor, the frame style, the construction is, very reminiscent of the 1930s, and just nice little touches to see that the equipment was actually designed for some maintainability. So just looking at this, I can see that what we've got is, I'm thinking, I can feel it actually. We've got some little red rings painted on here, little red highlights. And what they are is they're lubrication points. So from time to time you would probably take the back off the fan heater, you'd get your little can of 3-in-1 oil and dribble some inside. And when I push this tool inside, I can just feel it, it's soft. So what there will be here, there will be a felt pad. And what that will do is that will soak up the oil as you tip some into it. And they will be, well, it's some form of brass bearing here. I don't know whether it'll be a sintered brass bearing which will hold the oil, but certainly there's a brass stroke phosphor bonds bearing here. And the brass pad, that's now soaked, saturated in oil, what that will do is it will just deliver lubrication to the bearing. Most motors today are sealed for life, which basically means that they have a finite life, because when parts wear out you can't replace them. And the reality is, I don't think the modern motors are any better built. The manufacturers just decide that the product's got a 5-year life, and then you throw it away and buy another one. Where I can see this motor, if every few thousand hours of running, 10,000 hours, you put some drops of lubrication in there, and this motor will probably last for 100 years. So you can see these lubrication points here, top and bottom, and because we've got a front bearing where the fan is attached, and then we've got the rear bearing here, and they've just highlighted that in red paint. And if I just poke my stick inside it, and in fact I can just about see it, I can see like a felt pad in there, and that's just like an oil reservoir to keep everything lubricated. So that's just a really nice touch. So sticking out on either side of the motor body, you've got these two little lugs, these ears that stick out, and they're actually bolted to the chassis, this armature arrangement here. It's just bolted to there. But what they've actually done is, on either side of the ears, they've actually got a piece of rubber, so a little rubber pad. So that's obviously designed there to damp vibration and stop noise being transmitted into the framework. So that's a nice little touch that they've done there, isn't it? So you can see they've actually got two nuts here, stacked one on top of the other. So basically you've got the fixing nut, and then you've got what you call a lock nut on top of it. And you can say that this is just kind of old technology. This is before we had things like nylon lock nuts, nylock nuts, and before we had these various resins and glues that you could pour down the thread. The standard method of stopping nuts and bolts from coming undone would actually to get two nuts and kind of torque them against each other. And that's actually a very reliable method, very good. But obviously you need two nuts, which makes it slightly expensive. And that's probably why things like nylock nuts were developed, and star washers and all these much lower cost solutions. So we've got the two nuts here. We've got basically a metal clamping plate. Then we've got a piece of rubber. Then we've got the ear sticking out from the motor body. Then we've got another piece of rubber. And then we've got, looks like, would that call a cheese head screw even? Yeah, we've got a cheese headed screw under here, yeah. And the mains wiring emerges from the motor body just through a little rubber grommet, and that actually still seems quite ductile and rubbery. The wiring itself is cloth covered wiring. I think it'll be okay to give it a try, that. So it's obviously the it looks like the construction of this is, it's got like cotton weave material, a cotton braid over the top of it. Then we've got some rubber material, which is actually a bit hard. Now this, I can just see that this one is red. I wonder if this one is black on this side. Yeah, it is. So we've got, again, we've got the proper British Empire colours here. We've got the red live and the black for the neutral. And yeah, I guess the reality is it is in pretty poor condition, this wiring. I can pull the rubber off it, but I think it'll be okay to give it a quick test. I mean, I can't actually see us ever using this this heater in anger. I don't think it'd be safe, and the reality is I don't really need I haven't really got any need for it, because, you know, I've got modern central heating. I don't think you'd really need these little portable fan heaters anymore. Yeah, and I certainly just think the electrical safety of this could be a bit dubious. Well, you know, I'm not sure what we're actually going to do with this heater. And in fact, I was going to kind of leave it up to you guys to see what your comments were. I don't particularly want to use it as a heater again, although I always think it's a shame to destroy, you know, some piece of vintage technology. I mean, somebody made this in 1938. And it's probably survived quite well up until about 10 minutes ago when I got my hands on it. But I don't know what to do with it. Like I say, I don't think we could ever really use it as a heater again, because, to be honest, there are safer alternatives. If I needed a room heater, I think I'd go out and buy a modern one. I wouldn't really trust this. The electric motor is beautiful. I did think about maybe using it as a fan in the workshop, just to disconnect the electrical heating element here and use it as a fan. But the reality is, I don't really need a fan. Let's face it, it's only hot one day of the year in England, and fans are just noisy and annoying, so I don't think I'd find a lot of use for it as a fan. But it's a lovely thing. And now I think the case itself is beautiful. It's in really good condition now. It has obviously suffered a little bit of damage in the past, but you can hardly notice it. And I think this would actually clean up really well with a little bit of car polish on it. It's got a lovely, just a really nice kind of patina, a really deep lustre to it. And I think this would clean up really well. It's got this knob on, which has obviously come off an old radio, and this knob just feels like it's been araldited on. So I think we might try and get that off, but it does seem pretty firmly stuck on. It comes back to, though, I don't know what to do with it. Shall we rip out the heating element and maybe put a speaker in it? Or build a modern radio into it, or a CD player, or, well, probably not a CD player, maybe an MP3 player. We could do that, although we will have to try and get that knob off there to try and make it workable. That's one thing we could do. Or, given that it is a 1938 vintage, should we just put it back together, put it on eBay, because maybe somebody out there who collects this type of vintage equipment and would appreciate it, or would collect it. Because I think it's definitely what you call more of a display item. But I have to admit, it doesn't really float my boat. I think it's quite pretty, but I've got enough toys, and I can't move in the workshop as it is. So I think this would just be something else to trip over. I think it would be a shame, though, just to destroy it or throw it away. So perhaps you could leave in your comments some ideas of what we could do with it, if we should do anything with it. Should we save it? Should we restore it? Should we try and get it working as a heater again? I think that would be dubious. And I personally wouldn't want to then sell it on or give it to somebody else to use, because, yeah, you're just putting yourself and other people at risk, especially in this age of litigation. Yeah, so I'm really not sure what we should do with this. It does seem a shame to destroy it or throw it away, but equally I wouldn't want to sell it on to somebody who could maybe get into trouble with it. So really, I'm open to any suggestions or whatever comments you might have.